lion attends his savior's funeral. You won't believe what he did next in the vast savanna of the Serengeti in Tanzania, where acacia trees dot the endless golden grasslands and where ancient baobabs stand like sentinels against the African sky. Lived a man whose name was whispered with reverence across the plains. Henri Dumont, 68 years old, had been a wildlife ranger for more than 40 years. His weathered face and calloused hands testified to a life entirely dedicated to protecting this wilderness that he considered his sacred home. Henri was not an ordinary man. From his youngest age, he had developed a particular connection with nature. He could identify a bird by its song from hundreds of meters away, recognize animal tracks in mud dried for days, and sense weather changes well before clouds appeared on the horizon. This almost supernatural intuition had made him a living legend among his colleagues and the inhabitants of surrounding villagers. His small stone house, nestled on the edge of the reserve, had become over the years a true refuge for injured animals. Henri had transformed his barn into an improvised infirmary, where he treated zebras victims of predator attacks, birds with broken wings, and sometimes even lions caught in illegal snares. His wife Marie, who died 5 years earlier, had always supported him in this mission that she called divine. Since her disappearance, Henri had invested himself even more in his work, finding in the company of animals a comfort that humans could no longer provide him. This November morning, the dry season was beginning to show its effects on the savanna. Henri put on his khaki ranger uniform, laced up his worn but still sturdy leather boots, and left his house for his daily rounds. The air was dry and warm, charged with that particular smell of dust and dry grass that characterized this time of year. He knew every corner of these 50,000 hectares of savanna, every watering hole, every migration route, every pride territory. His first destination was the Serengeti River sector, where local Maasai herders had reported the presence of an apparently injured lion. Henri covered the 15 kilometers in his old Land Rover without difficulty, despite the rough terrain, his vehicle having navigated these paths for decades. Arriving near the riverbank, he immediately spotted the animal. A magnificent male lion with a dark mane was lying under an acacia tree, his right front leg visibly damaged. Henri approached slowly, speaking in a soft and soothing voice. The lion looked at him without aggression, as if recognizing an ally in him. Examining the wound, Henri discovered that a wire snare, probably set by poachers, had cut deep into the animal's leg. With infinite patience and precise gestures, he managed to remove the wire and clean the infected wound. The lion, docile throughout the operation, seemed to understand that this man was there to help him. After treating the wound with antiseptic and bandaging the leg with veterinary supplies he always carried in his vehicle, Henri remained seated for a moment near the animal, observing the river where elephants came to drink in the distance. This silent communion with nature was what he preferred in his job. In these moments, he had the impression of being an integral part of this complex and wonderful ecosystem. The lion finally stood up with a slight limp, but Henri knew it would heal. He had mentally marked the spot to come back and check on its condition in a few days. Driving back toward the base camp, he met Pierre Leblanc, a young wildlife ranger recruited 6 months earlier from France. Pierre deeply admired Henri and never missed an opportunity to learn from his experience. Mr. Dumont, how do you make animals trust you so easily? Asked Pierre, amazed by what he had just witnessed from a distance. Henri smiled, his blue eyes sparkling with wisdom. My young friend, trust cannot be commanded, it must be earned. It takes years of mutual respect, repeated benevolent gestures, for a wild animal to accept your presence. Each creature in this savanna has its own personality, its fears, its habits. You must learn to know them individually. They drove together to the ranger station, a concrete building that served as headquarters for the guards of this sector. Henri consulted the week's reports, noted his observations in the logbook, and planned his interventions for the following days. Despite the progressive digitization of record-keeping, he still preferred his handwritten notebooks, covered with his small, tight writing and detailed sketches of animal behaviors. In the afternoon, Henri went to another part of the reserve where a pride of lions was venturing too close to Maasai settlements, causing concern among the local population. The situation was delicate. The animals had to be guided back to their territory without harming them, while ensuring the safety of the villagers and their livestock. Henri had known this particular pride for several years. The dominant female, whom he had nicknamed Nala because of her regal bearing, had the habit of leading her pride toward areas with abundant prey during the dry season. He coordinated with local community leaders to temporarily move livestock to safer areas and worked with his team to create a buffer zone using natural deterrents. His approach, always based on cohabitation rather than elimination, had proven itself over the years. Human-wildlife conflicts had considerably reduced in his sector due to his innovative methods. As the sun began to set, painting the savanna in brilliant oranges and reds, Henri made a final patrol near a sensitive area where a young male lion had been recently spotted. This lone male, likely expelled from his birth pride, was searching for territory and represented both an opportunity for genetic diversity and a potential threat if he became desperate. Suddenly, in the silence of the approaching night, Henri heard a low, pained roar. He drove cautiously toward the sound and discovered a heartbreaking scene. A young male lion was trapped in a large metal snare, the wire cutting deep into his neck. The animal was weak from blood loss and dehydration, his golden coat matted with dried blood. Henri immediately assessed the situation. This was a complex rescue that would require sedation and surgical precision. He radioed for backup, requesting veterinary supplies and additional hands. While waiting, he stayed near the lion, speaking softly to keep the animal calm while preventing further injury. The young lion looked at him with eyes filled with pain and desperation. Henri recognized something familiar in those amber eyes. This was the cub he had helped rescue 3 years earlier when poachers had killed the pride's adults. Henri had overseen the cub's rehabilitation and eventual release into the wild. Now full grown, the lion seemed to recognize his savior even in his moment of greatest need. Pierre arrived 30 minutes later with the park veterinarian and additional equipment. The rescue operation was delicate, requiring careful sedation of the stressed animal followed by precise cutting of the wire snare. Henri coordinated the team with the expertise of decades, anticipating the lion's reactions and ensuring everyone's safety. When the lion was finally freed and the wound properly treated, Henri stayed with the animal as it recovered from sedation. The young male's eyes never left Henri's face, as if trying to communicate gratitude that transcended species barriers. This moment of connection, charged with emotion, remained forever etched in the ranger's memory. In the following weeks, Henri continued his patrols with the same passion as in the first days of his career. The dry season was intensifying, making water sources precious and concentrating wildlife around the remaining rivers and waterholes. Henri loved this challenging time despite the increased tensions it created between different animal groups. He monitored water distribution, tracked animal movements, and mediated conflicts between different species competing for resources. One particularly hot December morning, as temperatures soared above 45 degrees Celsius, Henri was returning from a long patrol checking on elephant herds near the reserve boundary. Suddenly, he felt an unusual pressure in his chest. He stopped his vehicle under the shade of a large baobab tree and waited for the sensation to pass. For some time, he had felt more tired than usual, but he had attributed this to the intense heat and demanding work schedule. The pain intensified dramatically, radiating down his left arm. Henri immediately understood what was happening to him. His father had died of a heart attack at 70 years old, and Henri had always known that genetics might catch up with him one day. He tried to reach Pierre on the radio, but his hands were shaking too much to operate the device properly. Henri leaned back in his seat, feeling his strength ebbing away. Surprisingly, he felt no panic. A profound peace washed over him as if he were accepting this end in the place he had loved most in the world. He closed his eyes, listening one last time to the familiar sounds of his beloved savanna, the distant rumble of elephants, the call of a fish eagle, the rustle of wind through dry grass. It was Pierre who found him 2 hours later, following Henri's radio silence and the GPS tracker in his vehicle. The young ranger immediately called for medical evacuation, but it was already too late. Henri Dumont had passed away peacefully, sitting in his vehicle under the ancient baobab tree, a serene expression on his weathered face. The news of his death spread quickly throughout Tanzania and beyond. International conservation organizations paid tribute to his 4 decades of service. The Tanzanian government announced that the main ranger station would be renamed in his honor, but Henri's family, including his sister and nephews who had flown in from France, decided to respect his final wishes, to be laid to rest in a simple ceremony within the reserve he had protected for so long. 3 days later, an extraordinary gathering took place near the same baobab tree where Henri had died. Rangers, researchers, Maasai elders, government officials, and conservationists from across Africa had come to pay their final respects. A simple wooden platform had been constructed, and Henri's body rested there, his face peaceful as if he were simply sleeping under the African sky he had loved. As the ceremony began with traditional Maasai prayers and readings from conservationists about Henri's legacy, something unprecedented happened. A low roar echoed across the savanna, growing closer. The assembled crowd turned to see a magnificent sight. The young male lion Henri had recently saved was approaching. moving slowly and deliberately toward the gathering. Behind him followed the pride that Henri had known for years, Nala and her family, including cubs that Henri had helped bring into the world. More lions appeared from different directions. The elderly patriarch Henri had treated for infected wounds, the lioness whose cubs he had saved from a flash flood, dozens of lions whose lives had been touched by this remarkable man. The human mourners stood in awed silence as the lions arranged themselves in a large circle around the ceremony. There was no aggression, no fear, only a profound sense of respect and loss that seemed to transcend the natural order. The young male lion that Henri had saved stepped forward and, in a gesture that brought tears to every human eye present, lowered his massive head in what could only be described as a bow. Pierre, overcome with emotion, recognized the profound significance of this moment. These were not just random animals. Every lion present represented a life that Henri had saved, a family he had helped keep together, a story of human compassion that had created bonds stronger than the natural fear between species. The lions remained throughout the entire ceremony, their presence transforming the human gathering into something sacred and otherworldly. When traditional prayers were offered, the lions seemed to add their own voices with soft rumbles and gentle roars. When Henri's body was carried to his final resting place beneath the great baobab, the entire pride followed in silent procession. As earth was scattered over Henri's grave and a simple stone marker was placed to commemorate his 40 years of service, the young male lion approached one final time. Standing beside the grave, he released a powerful roar that echoed across the entire savanna, a sound so full of grief and gratitude that it seemed to carry the voice of the wild itself, bidding farewell to its greatest protector. Slowly, as the sun began to set, the lions departed one by one, melting back into the golden grassland as silently as they had come. But the young male remained longest, lying beside Henri's grave as if keeping vigil. His golden eyes fixed on the place where his savior now rested. In the days following the funeral, rangers reported unusual behavior throughout the reserve. Lions would appear near Henri's house, now empty and silent. Young cubs seemed to search for the man who had bottle-fed them when orphaned. Even elephants, whose complex emotions Henri had always respected, were seen touching the area around his grave with their trunks, a behavior scientists interpreted as mourning. Pierre took over Henri's responsibilities, moving into the house and continuing the injured animal care program. Though he lacked his mentor's decades of experience, he possessed the same compassion and dedication. Gradually, the animals learned to trust him, recognizing in him the spiritual successor to their beloved protector. 6 months after Henri's death, the Tanzanian Parks Authority installed a bronze plaque near the baobab tree where he died. The inscription read simply, "Henri Dumont, guardian of the Serengeti, friend to all creatures. He taught us that love transcends all species, but more than any words, it was Henri's actions that continued to bear fruit throughout the ecosystem he had protected." The young male lion, now thriving and establishing his own territory, seemed to carry forward Henri's spirit of protection. Rangers observed him intervening in conflicts between species, almost as if he had learned conflict resolution from watching Henri work. The pride that Henri had known continued to avoid human settlements, respecting the boundaries he had taught them through patience and understanding rather than force. Pierre expanded Henri's educational programs, bringing school children from Arusha to learn about wildlife conservation. He always began these visits with the story of Henri and the lions, demonstrating how one person's compassion could transform an entire ecosystem. The children would visit Henri's grave, now perpetually decorated with fresh flowers left by visitors from around the world. The Serengeti had become a model for human-wildlife coexistence, attracting researchers and conservationists who wanted to understand Henri's methods. His detailed journals, filled with behavioral observations and innovative conflict resolution techniques, were studied in universities worldwide. But the most powerful testament to his work remained visible every day in the peaceful coexistence between humans and wildlife throughout his former territory. Each year, on the anniversary of Henri's death, something remarkable occurred. The same lions would gather at his grave, led by the young male he had saved. They would remain for hours in silent vigil, their presence drawing other animals, elephants, zebras, even traditionally prey species that seemed to understand this was a sacred time of remembrance. Local Maasai elders incorporated Henri's story into their oral traditions, telling their children about the Mzunga ranger who spoke the language of lions and taught both humans and animals to live together in harmony. His legend grew with each telling, but the core truth remained unchanged, that love, respect, and dedication could bridge any divide, even between predator and protector. The young male lion continued to thrive, eventually becoming a magnificent patriarch himself. Rangers noticed he was unusually tolerant of humans, never showing aggression toward research vehicles or patrol rangers. It was as if Henri's spirit of peaceful coexistence had been passed down, creating a lineage of lions that understood humans could be allies rather than enemies. Henri Dumont's story proved that a single life devoted to conservation could create ripples that extended far beyond one person's time on Earth. Every animal saved, every conflict resolved peacefully, every moment of trust built between species contributed to a more harmonious world. His legacy lived on not just in the records and reports, but in the very DNA of relationships between humans and wildlife in the Serengeti. The great savanna kept Henri's memory alive in every sunrise that painted the grasslands gold, in every lion's roar that echoed across the plains, in every moment when predator and prey shared the same waterhole in peaceful coexistence. Henri Dumont was gone, but his spirit remained forever woven into the fabric of the Serengeti, a testament to the power of one person's love for the wild world and all its magnificent creatures. Thus ends the story of the guardian of the Serengeti, a man who understood that true wealth is measured not in material possessions, but in the bonds forged between all living things. His legacy, more precious than gold, continues to enrich all those who had the privilege of knowing him and all those who, inspired by his example, choose to dedicate their lives to protecting our shared natural heritage.